When love is right in front of us and not around the corner, yeah.
23rd of March, obviously went into lockdown, and me and Sanjay just shaking our heads like, what the hell have we done? But that time was actually a blessing because all the distractions that we had disappeared, and we only then had to focus on family and work. And this is where the Savoys story starts. There's several arms to Savoys. We've got the property side, which is basically our management arm. We've got a development arm, a lending arm, an educational arm that we've built up over the last 3 years. And the educational bit is something that we've just launched this year, and we're just going to be pushing slowly, but ensuring that we stick to the fundamentals of just providing exceptional value property. So we went around this site. It was on the open market. It's in Burnham in Buckinghamshire. It was an office. We walked around, and I remember other developers are there. We always open our ears. We listen to what they're saying. So we only can get 5 flats in here. And myself and Sanjay had a smirk on our face. I'm like, these guys are missing a massive trick. I'm going to touch on this when we go through the mindset, but you need to understand the rules of the environment that you're working in. And when prior approval came out, we understood every facet of the prior approval rules in terms of grey areas, what we can actually maximize on, where we can utilize, and spaces we can use and we can't. We actually attained planning permission in a 3-stage process to convert this into 10 self-contained flats. We started this in lockdown 1. We finished this in lockdown 3, and I'll give you a run through on the numbers on this deal. So we actually purchased this site for 670,000. We spent $500,000 in terms of all the fees, build cost. We already knew before we started the works that the exit value was going to be at 2.5 million. So we put this forward, and at that point to the Property Investor Awards, and we ended up winning Commercial Property Deal of the Year 2020. Up until that point, both myself and Sanjay, when we were running our social media, we never really put our faces on there. But obviously once we won, the Property Investor Awards was tagging us, and it has our faces on there, so we ended up sharing it. Then we thought, actually, let's embrace change. Let's just put ourselves out there. And hence why a lot of you guys probably didn't know who we were 3 or 2 years ago, and you probably know who we are now because we embraced that change. It was a commercial with uppers, and as I walked around the back, it had a service road, and at the rear of the commercial premises on the back end of the service road was this detached garage. It was in bad condition. It was 50 square meters in size, and I asked the agent who actually owns this, and he said the vendor is on a separate title, but obviously it was in such poor condition. I said, I'll pay $475 for that commercial premises, but you guys need to give me this garage for free because I need it for when I do the renovation works for storage and so on, which they agreed. Now, again, by using commercial prior approval rights, we were able to change this from a garage to a 3-bed Muse House. And I'll run you through the figures on this one. So we acquired it for nothing. The whole build cost us 40K, and our GDV was 400 grand. And again, that year, I put this deal through the Property Investor Awards, and we won Property Deal of the Year 2021. And one of the judges, Jay Howard, I actually bumped into him at the Excel Investors show, and he said, I've never had a deal where I've marked 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 on every element of the deal. He goes, this is the first time for myself. We take quite a lot of pride in that. Thank you. So just something about what we've ended up doing during those 23 years, and obviously the last 3 years with Savoys is over 50 clients. We've done over 100 projects. In 23 years, we've only sold 4 properties ever. And the only reason we sold those 4 properties was we didn't know or have the right brokers that could tell how we could actually raise that money. If I had that knowledge prior, I'll probably still have those other 4 properties as well. And last week, we actually managed to get 600 tenants now managed under the Savoys group. And I think we're sort of close to 250 five-star Google reviews. These are from clients, people that have interacted with us, and most importantly, the tenants that occupy our properties. So once we started the development side where we ended up taking on clients, what we noticed was people will approach us and say, look, I've got money for the purchase, but I don't have money for the development. When it comes to development finance, what you tend to find is you need to be able to always pay that first bit of the build, and then when the valuer comes out, they'll release that back to you. But some people do not have that 30, 40, 50K that you probably need. So we've been working with Octane Capital. We ended up going for lunch with the managing director and several of the other directors of Octane and CPC Finance. We ended up creating a unique product where, we could, one, choose the valuer for the build that we're going to be doing for that client. Two, where they'll actually pay that build money in advance, which is quite unique. And three, they'll also guarantee that onto an exit product, like a buy-to-let product at the end. So for most of the clients, when they were coming to us, we could just say, look, here, purchase is going to be, for example, 400, the build is 100, the exit value is going to be 650, and you'll be able to exit on 75% of this, and the numbers are quite straightforward. We'll finish the build in 6 months, and during those last 2 years of that being implemented, we've done 30 deals with Octane Capital. So now, when it comes down to mindset, I think this has been the difference between why we've been so successful in this and why, when we've turned up in COVID-19, like lockdowns 1, 2, 3, why we've just kept going and why we've ended up benefiting. And even when that Liz Trust stuff was going on last year, we ended up at that point when everyone was panicking, agreeing 3 deals during that period. And a lot of this, there are those that know me, I like a lot of rap music. But I ended up looking at the people that are behind it. So most rap is from guys from US, Afro-Caribbean background. And those that know, these guys have, the odds are stacked against them from the start. 1 in 21 will be dead before 25. The US actually makes up 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. So 1 in 4 people in jail are going to be in jail in the US, and predominantly they're from an ethnic minority or black background. So when I see these guys that have done so well where all these odds are stacked against, I thought there must be something to it. Far from a Harvard student, I just had the balls to do it. Both myself and Sanjay, both from migrant family backgrounds. We've been grown up in Southall, which is a migrant area, moved in the late 80s to West Drayton, which is predominantly a council sort of area where my parents ran a business. But if you take someone like Jay-Z, he's also from that Marcy Projects, but that didn't stop him to becoming a billionaire. So I just thought, okay, there's nothing's going to stop me for us progressing and building what we've done and are now building what we're doing with the Savoys brand. So this I actually quite like. I had to come up with a strategy to come up mathematically. So when I mentioned, we came up with 2 strategies, and then we've just been pushing those 2 strategies solidly. So one was obviously the HMO, that provides that monthly cash flow. 2 was the commercial or residential. So that will not give you a massive monthly cash flow, but that will give you a massive cash lump sum, which you then can use on other projects. And is solely the reason why we've never raised any investor finance. Everything that we've had, we've only done through our work and the uplift that we had on our properties. Every boss starts off a worker. So those I don't know, so at the age of 16, I actually couldn't get a part-time job. The only place that would employ me was McDonald's, and I worked there for 3 years until I went to university and then changed to Halfords. But that doesn't stop what you can actually achieve. So obviously we are where we are, but you always remember where we started. My uncle said I never sell a million records, but I sold a million records like a million times. When Jay-Z gave the breakdown on this, he goes, my uncle said, look, in my lifetime, I could never become a rapper. So what makes you think that you could become a rapper. Now I've got a 2-year-old daughter. Now I see her, she's so fearless. She runs around. I took her to Sri Lanka and she just ran up to a dog, wanted to pat it on the head. And I'm like, don't do that, because the dog's gonna bite you. If you think about it, we're born fearless, but as we go through life, adults are then portraying their fears and what sort of held them back. Oh shit, I don't want to do that. Don't do this, don't do this. And this actually pulls you back, but sky's the limit. Even in defeat, there's a valuable lesson learned. So in 23 years of actually being in property, we've made losses, and I don't take those as losses. Those losses, I'll just say that's education. We pay for education. Let's not make that same mistake again. So during those, let's just say 10 years that we've been buying commercial or residential, I remember having one deal which I brought in that 2013 period, but the council knocked it back saying you don't have established B1A use as commercial. Now, I didn't want to then go through appeal and so on because I'm on a bridging loan. I chucked that back in auction. I remember we lost, I think 30 or 40K. But I said, okay, that's education there. Now, when we go through it, we'll get a stat deck from the owner to show it's got established use for the last 4 or 10 years or however long they've been using it as an office. So we'll never have a case officer kicking that back to us again. Now, this is Jay-Z said, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them. So I got rich. To me, that's a win-win. So how I took that is if you make money, you'll become successful. You can actually then impact people and change their lives. So when the Turkey earthquake happened, Sanjay phoned me up and he was away in India at that time. And he said, look, I want to really help in the Turkey earthquake. I'm like, look, he goes, I want to fly out there. I said, you can't really fly out there. So we then got in touch with someone who was on the ground there, which was an organization called Carcerate. They've been going for the last 30 years. So we got in touch with them. He said, look, don't send me money. He goes, I don't need that because it will just get lost with all the government and only 10% sort of reaches that front line. What we actually need is supplies and they get that delivered to a campsite. So we actually flew out there. We didn't really put it on social. We flew out, organized a truck, went to IKEA, bought the items they actually wanted, like steel plates, pots, pans, that these campsites needed, loaded that lorry up, and that went out then, delivered that. So we use the success that we have to actually give back to everyone, and for us, that's the win-win. This is also very important as well. So if we ever go broke, time is all we've got. Back in the early 2000s, ended up in a legal battle with someone during a property transaction. And that battle went on for 2 years. And that guy at that time had the big beard down to here. After 2 years, when I ended up to the final court hearing, he was there, but I didn't realize it was him. When I won and I was walking out, the guy came up to me and goes, look, Malky, you did nothing wrong. Look, it's fine. I'm like, oh, it's you. And I go, what's happened? He goes, I've got stage 4 cancer. I'm like, wow. And he goes, and this stuck to me till date. He goes, look, you come with nothing, you leave with nothing. The guy was, at that time, a multi-millionaire, but he only survived 6 months after that. And I realized it doesn't really matter what you have, it's how you live your life and how you treat people. And if you make money, you lose it, you can always make it back again. So money is not the be all and end all, health is.
You said that there were some other developers talking and they said they could only make 5 flats, but you knew of some tricks you could implement to get 10 flats. What were those?
It's basically the whole fabric of the building that's included part of prior approval, and a lot of people don't understand that. So I went into the loft and there was not enough head height to stand, but when I went onto the first floor, there was plenty of head height, so I knew if I drop it 2 foot down, that creates enough head height, and I created some flats there, and then we've utilised the undercroft on there. So, but it's basically the whole fabric of the building, and it's how you implement those changes. So, as the gentleman here mentioned, it's not straightforward. So there's certain processes and checkboxes you need to go through to get it passed. But with prior approval, I think there's only like 5 points that you need to make sure you're able to check off. And if you do that, then they can't refuse planning.
Do you use PD all the time for your schemes, or are you sometimes doing a bit of a mixture, or like full planning? Or?
I tell you what I do is PD and prior approval, because where your time is actually lost is waiting for planning. And I've had stuff over time where 100% we're getting this, and the case officer says, yeah, we're going to get it, and they fail it. And then you've got a choice of either resubmitting the application, waiting 12 weeks, or putting it to appeal. and it could take 12 months, but then when you're dealing with bridging finance or development finance, it can be quite costly. So we came up with a strategy where I can move my money quicker. So if I can turn it around in 6 months, I can do 2 deals with that same pot of money. And that's effectively it for us. So it's not about, I want to have a block of houses or flats that look like this, and I want to pose next to it. I'm just like, it's a business. Property is a business. How do I turn it around? How do I, push forwards, keep the teams and stuff that we're working, keep them busy. And and for us, we enjoy 2 aspects of it. When you sort of find the site, get the planning and everything approved, and the finishing during the build, it can be quite stressful, and I don't really enjoy it.
You've quoted today, which one's your favourite and why?
I tell you, the one is basically the 2-pack one, about the game, because literally, like, I just say life is a game. There's nothing to it, like everything through. If you understand that, you could play the game of life, you could play the game of planning, anything that you want to do. If you're an architect and so on, you just have to understand that concept. If I can get this is not going to be an issue. It's the same with me going to university and stuff. I'm not from the brightest background, or my parents aren't academics, but I've ended up getting a degree and a master's. It's just because I just understood, okay, this is how I sort of need to work, and this is how I need to operate, and so on. So I think that's the key, and we incorporate that daily in what we do.
Sure. That story is just, well done.
Thank you.
Well done, inspiring, just to see what you've done, heard what you've done, not seeing none of that through social and physically hearing what you've done.
No, thank you. Both myself and Sanjay, we don't really like to brag, so you're never gonna, I say this to a couple of people that come up to us, look, you're never gonna see us posing next to a fancy car or saying anything like this. I never, apart from just on here, we never quote numbers. It's just who we are. Doesn't mean that we don't have the cars and we don't make more than some of the other people out there, but I think when I've been analysing the industry for 20 years before we came out on socials, and the ones that brag the loudest, they don't last the longest. So the vision is no limit, so nothing's off limit. So how we grew this and how we grew it sort of in the last 3 years is like nothing's off limit. If I have a conversation with someone, Sanjay does, we're like, always consider it. So we ended up in lending. We ended up in partnership with, we set up a lending company with some ex-Shawbrook directors. That didn't go, it was going quite well. The whole thing went in, closed down when they lost their funding line, but we had our own sub-lending company within it. We then incorporated that within to Savoys, and we now sort of a lender. We didn't really envision that sort of happening. Obviously, we're doing the educational stuff. Nothing's off limit. I just think it's just a great way to have that mindset. Don't sort of limit yourself. If I hit, for example, if I hit 5 million in my portfolio, that's it. Because what I've noticed is when I look at athletes, and Tyson Fury said this, he goes, all I want to be is world champion. And when he ended up becoming world champion, he fell into depression because that's all he wanted as a child. So if you don't set yourself a limit, there's not that anti-climax.
But in a commercial conversion, what kind of exit you always plan? And what it is being changed since the markets are not very stable. So what is the end product that you normally plan to offset all these issues?
So we always have multiple exits, but the one exit is always going to be to hold the property. So I don't want to put in all that hard work to then sell it off. And then I've looked at some of the sites that we sold off. So there's 4 that we sold off, and like, okay, that's actually gone up more than double, and I should have just held on to that, and so on. So if we look at it, I want to make sure I can hold on to it. And how we do that is we work with lenders that confirm basically the purchase price, what we're spending on the build. And they confirm, okay, look, Malky, if you finish this site in 6 months, we'll guarantee to offer you 650 or £1 million as your exit value. So then I know that I'll be able to get 75% of that, whatever, £1 million, and that's my exit. And I know how much money I'm going to leave in the deal if I'm taking everything out. But I work with those lenders to ensure that I'm able to do that.
And do you normally plan the exit in terms of like offloading, or what I mean, like what you call title split, and taking the residential separate from commercial, selling the commercial, keeping the residential, or it's always going to be a one freehold?
To be honest, I've heard people talk about title splits and so on. I looked into it. It may work for them, it doesn't really work for us. If I've got, for example, that 10 flat deal, I probably got more as it as one title, and then a commercial valuation, then it's probably someone will try to get by title splitting it. I don't think it works. To keep it on one title, there's no difference of having it on there or not. Having it all split and then having to deal with that and then paying stamp duty. And when you look at it, it's quite time consuming, and I don't think it's that much more profitable.
Most developers are too busy spending time working in their business, and that means that they're trying to do everything on their own, or they're trying to spend so much time and energy, and after they get burnt out or they're not really growing. You guys have got 30 sites in a year. What did you guys do to start working on the business, and how did you kind of scale that up?
So we're firm believers of empowering people. So people that have joined, we may have given them an equity share of like different parts of the business. So obviously we've got the 4 arms here, but the shareholding of those 4 arms is different across. So we've got Hardeep, who's a partner of ours, equal equity shareholder, but he looks after development stuff, and that deals with the client. So he then focuses around his own work day to day, but also all the client stuff and the client visits and so on. So that basically frees our time up that we don't need to, but obviously we still visit clients. We still turn up to the sites, but he does a lot of that, so we can then focus basically just on our deals in particular. And as we're growing, we're sort of working out ways on how to empower people, because one of the things you don't want is someone join the team and they're great and they leave, and that leaves a massive vacuum. So we always have to establish, how can I make this person stay? What's rewarding for them? So we've got Lauren that's joined us, so she's quite interesting she runs her own skip company, so one of the very few women in the UK that runs her own skip company, and she's a budding developer. So we said, why don't you join us on the project management side. We'll also help her to do her own sites, so we're not going to charge anything on that, but she'll learn from those and so on. So she should be now exchanging on a site where she'll be conveying HMO and then also building a self-contained property as well. Yeah, cool.